So today I'm gonna throw you guys for a curveball, but I think it's super important, and it's something I've wanted to talk about on this channel for a long time, and I never quite thought how I could frame it right. And so I figured, you know what, like it's probably best that we just do it. And this pertains to the red pill, blue pill mindset. I'm gonna give you guys just an overview of what that is. Think about The Matrix. If you've seen The Matrix, it's a classic. If you're younger, maybe you haven't seen it. It's a classic from the mid-90s, I believe, where you've got the red pill, which is like take the red pill and like see the Matrix and you can never go back. Or take the blue pill, everything's fine. You'll see the world the way you currently see it, and you won't really see the dangers that are out there. You won't be red pilled, like you won't see through the Matrix. You'll just be part of the herd, the sheep, if you will. That's the easiest and briefest way I could explain it, but basically it's boiled down into the red pill and the blue pill. In our culture, it's becoming amazingly evident. Once you're red pilled, you'll see it all the time, but there's just blue pill betas everywhere, where they're just walking through our culture like sheep. They're just doing what they're told. They're debt slaves. They're completely plugged into the system. It's a mental model, and I learned a mental model from a gentleman named Charles Koch. Him and his brother David own what is known as the Koch. Well, they're the Koch brothers. They're the evil Koch brothers. You may have heard of them. They own things like Georgia Pacific, Koch Industries. What's the carpet? Stainmaster carpets, textiles. They've got cattle. They've got oil. They've got trucking lines. All that stuff. At the time I was working for Charles, he was the fifth, and his brother David, I believe, was the sixth wealthiest gentleman in the world, depending on how they measure that. But they had the largest, or the second largest, because them and Cargill would go back and forth, second largest private business in America. And so Charles had this saying that he was always looking for mental models. And he had this framework where when you add a mental model, you've got a map to see the world differently. You'll see things differently than you saw them before, and you'll be able to stack these mental models on top of each other to give yourself a clearer picture about what is going on in the world, to the best that you can try to figure out like what is going on. You'll see through the Matrix. You'll see things as they really are. And most people don't want to take the red pill. Most people are blue pill betas plugged into the system. I was having this conversation with a couple guys yesterday at my place, and we were discussing this, and we're talking about our country and like where we're at. There's a lot of blue pill betas out there, and a lot of dudes that are plugged into this system, and they're getting screwed. And we were talking about it in the context of women. So this conversation here, this video today, is going to be about women. Good group, and I saw this group form, like Elliot House. You guys might see, a bodybuilder. He's down here in St. Pete. I mean, he had like 900 subs at the time. My buddy Justin turned me on to him. He's like, dude, check this guy out. And then I went through a terrible breakup at one point. I ended up stumbling into Richard Cooper's content. And then through that, I found Rollo Tomasi, and actually I read David Gatto's, not amazing. I'll link to all these guys and their different books. But I had never really had a real education in like, this is how women work. And though I saw how some of the economics of our society worked, and I kind of understood that, when it comes to dating, relationships, marriages, just being out there, like seeing how these things interact, a lot of dudes are finding themselves down the road and they're like, why am I not where I want to be? Or why am I like with this one chick? Or like, why, like, how does things get screwed? Like, how did I arrive here? And the truth of it is like, you're probably not red pilled. And it sounds like, the more that you educate, the more you figure out like, oh, there's this thing called hypergamy, and that's a mental model, and it's basically like how mammals reproduce in many facets, particularly the females. And so as this pertains to relationships and females, the typical dude right now is sitting on his phone, he's going through Tinder, he's swiping, because he's scared to just go out and actually just meet females. And females in our culture are just, men are just coming in, they're just flocking to them. And when they're in their 20s and they're hot and they're young, they're, oh, guys just chase me, they just chase me, I'm gonna go do my feminine thing, very blue pilly, very liberal type of like, the whole feminine energy is amazingly majestic. But what we've done in our culture is we've had an entire generation, almost 2 generations of women now that are raising a third. So this will start to present itself very clearly over the next decade in our demographics. But we have an entire 2 generations now that we're taught on scale, oh, go be a feminist. You know, you don't need a man. You can do everything without a man. And so, you know, they've basically just had, through the advent of social media and all these other things, so much undeserved attention for the wrong reasons. Like, oh, I'm all dolled up and I've got some skimpy clothes on and my hair is looking good and I've got my lip curled out and I got 55,000 likes on it or something like that. Good for me. You don't want to be in a relationship with that chick. Like, you don't want anything to do with that chick. You don't want that chick on your Instagram. You don't want her in your you think you do. You don't want anything to do with that. What you want is you want natural beauty, you want natural strength, you want a woman that was raised by men or had men in her life. If her dad wasn't around, red flag, not even an option. Right? Now, not saying that girls that don't have fathers can't turn out correct, like can't turn out like where they're a virtuous woman, but the odds are not in your favor. That could potentially be a red flag. She didn't grow up with brothers. That could also be another red flag. Like, if she has no concept of masculinity and she was raised by feminists, you might want to reconsider this. Because what will occur is that these women, like when I lived in DC, you would notice they would get to 30, they'd get to 35, they're out doing their thing, they're meeting different guys, you know, they've lived with that guy, this guy, that guy, you know, they get to 35 years old and they're like, oh, well, I want to have kids now. I'm like, I'm going to be late having kids. And they start to realize, like, now they have competition from half a generation underneath them. 25-year-olds are now competing with them for the same dating pool, if you will, and their options become super limited in what they can actually, like, obtain. Like, now you're a 35-year-old female who has been around quite a bit, and they want, you know, a guy that's 6 foot tall, makes 6 figures, has 6 in the pants, has a 600 horsepower car, you know, like that's their list of things. Or they finally realize, like, okay, standards have to be lowered, but they're not necessarily going to be happy with lowering those standards. So what they realize at that point in time is, like, okay, they figured out their sexual marketplace value, and they found out that they have hit the wall, if you will, and their desirability is on its way down, as opposed to a man where his desirability, as he gets his crap together and as he starts to build a life and as he starts to compile resources for himself and as he starts to compile a legit friend group that's, like, good, as he starts to make cuts in his friend group, as he starts to move forward with dudes that are making dents in the universe, no matter how big or small, but they're just moving forward in a way, his options become more and more abundant. In fact, the more success he has in his life, the more abundance mindset he'll probably take on, and he'll have that in his finances, he'll have that in his business, he'll have that in his relationships, he'll have abundance in everything that he sees. And it's important to at least start to put together your mental model of the red pill and the blue pill. If you look at our entire world right now, you're seeing a lot of people are totally blue pilled. They're plugged in, they're doing what they're told, they put their little thing on, they take their little, you know, their little thing to the arm, they do all that stuff, and they're told, oh, you do this, oh, guess what, we're gonna pull the rug on you, actually you have to wear these again even if you got this, oh, you know what, we need to have to boost you up, and, like, they're just gonna keep changing the goalposts on you. But the truth of it is that there's a larger agenda here occurring than do this for your neighbor and for your society, and because we want to be good stewards of, like, stopping this terrible plague, even though they're creating one with their labs in there and the variants and all these other crazy, like, they're actually creating a legitimate plague with their solutions. Remember, government problems, government solutions. It just gets worse and worse. But this mental model that Charles talked to us about was one of the most pivotal things that had ever occur in my education. And it was like a 10-minute message. And it was like, acquire mental models. And if you can acquire mental models, and you can stack these mental models on top of one another, you'll start to see that these spectacles start to get clearer and clearer, and you don't know exactly what's going to happen. You can't predict future, but you start to become wiser.